Greetings to you, my friends. Very nice to meet again. When we go for a long journey, we normally plan carefully our tools to take with. The same with us. When we plan a long research, it's very important to make sure that the terms we're talking about are very clear for us. Today, we will talk about the terminology that we have in store for our journey. For the first time, the term sanctuary we find in the book Exodus, in Hebrew, Shmot, or names, chapter 25. Prior to that, God establishes a bilateral covenant with Israel on the Mount Sinai. As in confirmation, Israelites said, in one voice, all the words which God hath spoken we will do. When Israelites left Egypt, they left with not empty hands, but they basically, it's written, plunged Egyptians because of the fear of another huge plagues that might come upon them. Children of God hoped to enter promised land rich, and they planned their new life with a good condition in material sense. So their tents were full of goodies and full of materials from magnificent empire. With all of that in mind, God tells them in chapter 25 of Exodus, He tells Moses, tell the sons of Israelites to bring me an offering. It is a voluntary offering for me, and for those whose heart prompts them to give, they may give. But you have to take control of the goods and materials that you will receive. So from one side, we see the voluntary basis of giving, and secondary, you have a point where somebody will receive the goods. Further, we read about the materials that God needs for His sanctuary. And it's 15 different materials. Gold, silver and copper, precious metals, blue, purple, scarlet yarn and fine linen, goat hair and ram skins, leather, acacia wood, olive oil, spices, onyx stones and other gems. From chapter 25 all the way to the end of the book of Exodus, to chapter 40, we read different approaches that needs to be taken in order to construct sanctuary. Finally, we read the main verse of entire course, book Shmot, chapter 25, verse 8. Let them make sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them. There is a number of terms used for the English word sanctuary. We will choose three main ones to describe. The first one, sanctuary itself. To the English language, it came from Latin and it means holy. In Hebrew, it means the same. Very often it's used in combination Beit HaMikdash, which means holy house, referring to the temple. And especially later when Solomon built the temple, that word Mikdash is in use. Let's look at another term that's used in Tanakh to describe sanctuary. It is tabernacle. And tabernacle comes from also Latin word, and it means tent or temporal dwelling, temporal settling. And it talks about divine presence that settling down with Israelites. In Hebrew, for that term, we're using the word Mishkan. And Mishkan in Hebrew is a beautiful word because it consists out of two parts. Mi, which means in or in a center or among, and the word Shakan, which means to dwell, to live in a tent, in a portable dwelling. It means God wants to live with Israelites. He wants to live with His people and wants to be their God. The last one, third one, which we will be describing today, is tent of meeting. Tent of meeting, also exchangeable word with the previous two ones. In Hebrew, it will be Ohel Moed. Ohel means tent, and Moed means appointed time, meetings, seasons, feasts, or congregation. What is it appointed time for Israel nation? First of all, it is 3 feasts, the main feasts of the year: Passover and Day of Atonement, Day of Tabernacles, and of course, weekly and yearly Shabbats. All this appointed time means that Lord wants to meet with His people and wants to reveal something about Himself to His people, about His plan of salvation, about His character. It is like God saying to Moses, "Go into the tent of meeting, tent of appointed time, and I will show you something about myself, something about my character, about my plan of salvation for the people, and about my holiness." Rambam, one of the Jewish philosopher, greatest scholar of the Middle Ages, describes Mishkan and Mikdash as interchangeable words, and saying that Mishkan is the temporary Mikdash and Mikdash is the permanent Mishkan. Is a little bit confusing, isn't it? But Mikdash is the temple as well. Later, when Solomon builds the temple, it will be Mikdash. Mishkan is something more portable, is the place where Shekinah glory dwells. It's an inner, secret place where God Himself, God's presence, dwells. And amazing that we as well, in Hebrew terms, called Mikdash. And God Himself sent His Son to dwell or to tabernacle, to Mishkan with us on this earth. Paul says, "Don't you know that you are temple of God and the Spirit of God lives in you?" Now we can talk about Mikdash and Mishkan, referring to Christ Himself, to God who is dwelling among His children, and to us, our bodies. All of that called in all these 3 terms: sanctuary, tabernacle, and tent of meeting. Let's draw a conclusion for the talk today. Israelites willingly responded to the call from Moses, from God, to bring offerings for the building of tabernacle. And in spite of what they planned for themselves, they brought it, and in a big measure, in order to build a holy place, holy house for their God, until the point they don't need anymore, and Moses has to stop the offerings and send them back home. And they willingly obeyed and respond, showed that they do want God to dwell with them, in their midst, in the center of their encamping, in the center of their congregation. As they did the same in our lives, we, as a response to God's call, can build our holy temple, temple of our body, our minds, our character, in a patterns that God reveals to us in His book. It's up to us, the builders, to build His sanctuary, as He calls us. "Let them build me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." God bless you to be these builders. God bless you to offer God everything what you have in your tents, in your houses, that you can be that beautiful structure in order to get to know God better, in order that God could reveal Himself to you and to those who is around you. God bless you.